Good morning, children. So hope you are all preparing well for your exams. Okay, now in chapter reviews for NEET or JEE revision, today I'll be revising a second year topic, that is electrostatics. So it's a very vast chapter, as you know, involving number of concepts, and you definitely get one or two questions based on this particular chapter. Okay, either from potential and capacitance one question may be given, or you may get a question based on charges, fields, and then Gauss law applications. So let's first look at the chapter review. Okay, what all concepts are important from numerical point of view. Okay, so here in this chapter we may get questions which are related to properties of charges. Okay, basic properties of charge. Okay, then coming to Coulomb's law. Okay, questions related to applications of Coulomb's law between 2-point charges, 3-point charges, two pendulums, angle made by pendulum with vertical, and so on. Then questions related to electric field, lines or lines of force. Then questions related to calculation of electric field strength, evaluating electric field strength for a point charge, then multiple charges, and so on. Then comes dipole, field produced by a dipole along axial line, equatorial line, or any other point, and then potential energy of a dipole, torque acting on a dipole, dipole-dipole interaction. So everything about dipoles. Then electric flux, Gauss law. Okay, relating flux we have Gauss law and its applications to continuous charge distributions. So these are the subtopics in the first part of the chapter, that is charges and fields. Okay, so in part 1 of electrostatics, okay, let us quickly go through the formulas and important concepts regarding these parts. Now coming to properties of charges. Okay, regarding properties of charges, what all did we study? Okay, the first property, charge is additivity. Okay, what does additivity of charge say? The net charge given to a body can be added algebraically. Like if you are giving a charge Q1, Q2 minus Q3 plus Q4 and so on, then the net charge given to a body can be algebraically added along with the sign. Positive for positive charge and negative for negative charge. Then second is quantization. Quantization says the net charge of a body should always be n times the charge of electron. It can be positive or negative, where n will never take a fractional value. But an exception for this we have already studied, quarks. Okay, there are different types of quarks which are identified. They are not stable elementary particles which possess a charge 1/3 of an electron and 2/3 of an electron. Okay, the quarks which produce a charge or which have a charge of 2/3 of electrons, we call it as up quark. And -1/3 we call it as a down quark. Okay, you can get a charge of electron and proton by adding this up and down quarks. So this is an exception for quarks, but they are not stable particles, elementary particles. Then charge is invariant. Does not vary with the speed. Mass changes with speed according to Einstein's relation. Okay, mass will be a variable according to the relation m is equal to m naught by under root 1 minus v square divided by c square. But charge does not vary. Even if charge travels with the speed of light, its magnitude is not going to change. That's called invariance of charge. And we know charge is a scalar quantity. SI unit is Coulomb. But apart from this, we also use electrostatic and electromagnetic unit. What is electrostatic unit? 1 ESU. It is stat coulomb. And electromagnetic unit of charge is ap coulomb. What is the conversion? 1 coulomb is 3 into 10 to the power 9 stat coulomb, or 1/10 of an ap coulomb. Okay, these are the conversions Okay, when you are converting the regular unit into electrostatic and electromagnetic unit. So these are a few points that you have to remember regarding properties of charges. Okay, there is nothing much to explain in this, but you may get questions related to Q is equal to plus or minus ME. Okay, giving the charge, whether the charge is possible or not, find the number of electrons in a given amount of charge and so on. So this is a basic level questions. Then coming to Coulomb's inverse square law. Okay, we know according to the Coulomb's inverse square law, force between 2 point charges. Okay, remember this, it's applicable only for point charges, is given by 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. We use K, Q1, Q2 divided by R square. Okay, 2 point charges Q1 and Q2 are separated by a distance. R is the distance of separation. Then in scalar form, you can write it as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught K Q1 Q2 by R square. And we know 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught is 9 into 10 to the power 9. The value of 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. 10 power 9, write its unit, Newton meter square per Coulomb square. Epsilon naught is called the permittivity of free space, whose value is 8.87 into 10 power minus 12 Coulomb square per Newton meter square. And this K is called the dielectric constant, which is a dimensionless quantity. Other name is relative permeability. Not permeability, I'm sorry, it is relative permittivity or specific inductive capacitance. Then it takes values from 1 to infinity. 1 for insulators and infinity for conductors or metals. Okay, this is a scalar form of Coulomb's inverse square law. So based on this, you will definitely be given some questions. Find the force between 2 point charges. Okay, they are separated by a certain distance and so on. But first let us look at questions related to Coulomb's inverse square law involving only 2 point charges. Okay, later on we will go for multiple charges. Say the question can be like this. A charge Q, capital Q, is divided into 2 parts. Small q and q minus q. What should be the value of small q so that the force between them is maximum? Okay, again I repeat, a charge capital Q is split into 2 parts, q and q minus q. What should be the value of small q so that the force between these 2 particles, that means the divided values, becomes maximum? Okay, what is the condition for it? We know the force between them. I will replace that 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught as one constant. Is it q into q minus q divided by r square? Force will be maximum when dF by dq becomes 0. So when you differentiate and equate it to 0, we will get small q as q by 2. That means how should we divide the charge? Whenever charge is divided into 2 equal parts, then force will become maximum. So this is one very often given question. Even in gravitation you get this type of question. And instead of giving a charge divided into small q and q minus q, sometimes they may give you a large number of identical charges. Okay, q, so many such charges up to n, where n is an even number which is much greater than 2. Again I am repeating, we are given large number of charges, each of charge q. How many such charges are given? Capital N. Then what is the ratio of maximum to minimum force between them after dividing them into 2 groups? Or the question can be, divide these charges into 2 groups such that force is maximum. Divide them into 2 groups such that force is minimum. What is the ratio of maximum to minimum force? Then just imagine if you have large number of charges. Just now I told you, when will force be maximum? If you divide them into 2 equal groups. That means out of n particles, n by 2 charges in one group, n by 2 charges in another group. So maximum force will be proportional to n by 2 q into n by 2 cube. Q1, Q2 product I am writing. I have divided them into equal number of particles. And force will be minimum if one particle is in one group, remaining particles are in the other group. Now find out what is the minimum force proportional to q into n minus 1 q. Anyway, we want the ratio between them. Q and Q will get cancelled. What is the ratio of maximum to minimum force after dividing? F max by F minimum will be n square by 4 in the numerator, denominator n minus 1. This gives you the ratio of maximum to minimum force. Look at this question. It is said that there are two charges, capital Q and capital Q, separated by a distance d. What charge should be placed and where should it be placed for the system to be in equilibrium? Remember, whenever the question is system is in equilibrium, a system is said to be in equilibrium when the net force acting on each charge is 0. So net force on this should be 0, net force on this charge should be 0, and the net force on this charge should be 0. So we know because both the charges are of like type, okay, similar type of charges, where should you place the third charge? Exactly at the center. Then only the forces will get balanced. To get the magnitude of Q naught, okay, this is d by 2, d by 2. Distance should be equal to get the net force on Q naught to be 0. Because Q and Q are of same magnitude and they are like charges. Then what should be the magnitude of Q naught? To get the magnitude of Q naught, I will take the net force on capital Q to be 0. How many forces is capital Q experiencing? One due to Q naught, another due to capital Q. Okay, if I write the net force as 0 on capital Q, I am not using Q1, Q2 and so on. Force between these two charges, Q into Q by d square, plus force between these two charges, Q into Q naught divided by d by 2 whole square, should become a 0. 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught will anyway go to 0. Simplify this, you will get capital Q plus Q naught by 4 as 0. Tell me what should be the value of central charge? It should be negative and having a magnitude of 1/4 of the charge at the corner. So then the whole system will remain in equilibrium. And because the charges are equal, we have got this charges exactly at the center. Suppose I give this as 4Q and this as Q. First find out the point where you have to place the charge. How to get the point where you have to place the charge? See, the distance is d. Let the charge to be placed is Q naught. Somewhere here, which is at a distance x. Remaining distance will be d minus x. The force on Q naught should be a 0. How many forces is Q naught experiencing? One is due to 4Q, which is repulsive, this side. Force on Q naught due to Q, again repulsive, which is opposite. Equate the two forces. This is force on Q naught due to 4Q. This is the force on Q naught due to Q. Equate the forces between these two charges. K, I am writing it as K itself, 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. Q into Q naught by d minus x whole square should be equal to force between these two charges. 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught 4Q into Q naught by x square. Equate Q and Q, Q naught and Q naught gets cancelled. Apply square root on either side. 1 by d minus x is 2 by x. Cross multiply. X is equal to 2d minus 2x. What should 3x be equal to? 2d. Implies x is equal to 2d by 3. But from where are you measuring this distance is important. Read the option carefully. Okay, sometimes they give you the distance from Q. Otherwise in options you will have distance from 4Q. Okay, one is from 4Q, another is from Q. I have given you the answer from 4Q. It is at a distance 2d by 3. From Q you will get the distance as d divided by 3. So be careful when you are marking the options. Okay, for finding out a point where the net force is 0 acting on Q naught. Okay, sometimes questions will be given like stable and unstable equilibrium of a charge. Okay, look at this question. 2 point charges, each of charge q, are separated by a certain distance. Then we have kept a charge q naught, which is a positive test charge, exactly at the center. So is the charge in stable or unstable equilibrium when you displace along x-axis and when you displace along y-axis? Okay, when do you say a particle is in stable equilibrium? It will be in stable equilibrium if you displace the charge and there is a force to bring it back to its initial position. That means there should be a restoring force to bring it back to initial position. Check out. If I displace q naught this side, there will be a large force of repulsion between q naught and q. This force will decrease and this force will increase. So is this repelled by capital Q and trying to come back? So what kind of equilibrium is it? Since it is coming back to initial position, there is a force which is trying to bring it back to initial position. We say that equilibrium is stable. If you displace a particle upward by a small distance, Q and Q naught, repulsive force. Q and Q naught, another repulsive force. See, is the net force acting in upward direction? When you displace the particle upward, net force is also acting in upward direction. So there is no force to bring it back to initial position. We say it is in which type of equilibrium? Unstable equilibrium. For displacement along y-axis, particle is unstable equilibrium position. For a small displacement along x-axis, it will come back and restore its initial position. Okay, now coming to questions where pendulums are involved. Okay, look at the question. Okay, from the same pivot, 2 pendulums are suspended, identical pendulums, whose length is L. Mass of the bob, I am taking it as M. See, when you give a charge Q to both the pendulums, okay, we know they repel each other. The first question will be, what is the angle made by this pendulum with vertically? Okay, suppose they are repelling, making an angle theta. The distance between them, I'll take it as x, charge is q, length of the pendulum is given as L. Find out the value of this theta. So in such a case, since the bob is in equilibrium, identify all the forces acting on the bob. Weight is acting downward. Electrostatic force of repulsion. Then tension in the string. Resolve T into components. If this angle is theta, T cos theta, and this side we get T sin theta. Equate the forces. What is T cos theta equal to? It is balancing the weight. So T sin theta is electrostatic force. T cos theta equals to mg. Divide both of them. Okay, we get tan theta equal to electrostatic force between the charges divided by mg. And we know electrostatic force. Okay, how do we write this electrostatic force of repulsion? 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, I am writing it as k, q square divided by x square. So remember this relation. You can replace Fe as kq square by x square. And if at all, if in the question they say that theta is extremely small, okay, consider theta to be very small, then tan theta tends to theta, and you can replace theta as length of the arc by radius, that is theta can be written as x by 2 by L, that is x by 2L. Then what will happen to this relation? X by 2L becomes equal to k q square by x square into mg. X square into x. Will it be x cube? All the remaining terms are constant. Implies q square is proportional to x cube. Remember this relation. How is charge related to distance between the pendulums? Square of charge is proportional to cube of distance between them. Because based on this, you may get one more question like this. Say if they give you a question, if charge starts leaking at a constant rate, that means pendulums are losing the charge at a constant rate. what would happen to the distance between the two particles? They start approaching each other. Then with what speed do they approach each other? If dq by dt is constant, find the speed with which the pendulums approach. To solve this question, you can directly begin from this. Since q square is proportional to x cube, differentiate it. 2q into dq by dt is proportional to 3x square into dx by a dt. We know dx by dt itself gives me speed. 3x square I am not changing. This is anyway a constant. 2q into k. Or you can replace q because 2 is constant, k constant, 3 constant, but q is not constant. What is q proportional to? X to the power 3 by 2. So 2k, in the place of q I will write x to the power 3 by 2 by 3x square is proportional to velocity. If I consider all these constants or remove all the constants, how is speed related to distance? V is proportional to x to the power 3 by 2 minus 2 implies pendulums approach with a speed x equal to minus half or x to the power minus half. So this is how even on speeds you may get a question. Because in this question they said the rate at which charge is lost is constant, we have continued. Sometimes they may give dq by dt as kx. So continue the same. Instead of dq by dt taking it as a constant, you will write it as k into x. Modify it according to the question. Look at one more question which is again regarding pendulums. So in this question it is said that two pendulums with a charge q, on each of them make an angle theta with vertical and the distance of separation is x. It is observed that the angle is not going to change even if you immerse this system in a liquid. Okay, the whole system is immersed in a liquid with the same charge. Then angle theta is not going to change. So in such a case, what is the dielectric constant of the liquid? Okay, dielectric constant of this medium. Given density of pendulum is rho s and density of the liquid I am writing it as rho n. Now just now I have written whenever you take the pendulum systems, if it is in equilibrium, what did we get? Tan theta is equal to force between the charges, electrostatic force in air divided by mg when the particles are in air or when the pendulum is suspended in free space. Now angle is not going to change when you immerse it in a liquid. Again I will write tan theta is force between the charges in the medium by, we know mg is not written, we have to take apparent weight. Okay, weight of the body decreases when you immerse it in a liquid due to buoyant force. So what is apparent weight? mg into 1 minus 1 by relative density. And we know relative density is density of solid by density of the liquid. And force in the presence of an electrostatic or dielectric constant is force in air divided by k. Okay, while writing Coulomb's force we have already discussed. In the dielectric constant is k, then force decreases by k times. So when you put these two conditions in this, equate tan theta, what will you get the relation as? Force in air by mg is force between the charges in the presence of a medium by mg into 1 minus 1 by density of solid by density of liquid. I'll reverse the fraction in right. And we know force in medium is nothing but force in air divided by k. So force in air is equal to force between the charges in air divided by dielectric constant into 1 minus density of liquid by density of solid. Cancel of this, bring the k to the left hand side. So dielectric constant is 1 by 1 minus density of liquid by density of solid, nothing but take LCM density of solid by density of solid minus density of a liquid. You can remember this expression provided angle is not going to change. So this type of questions can also be given regarding pendulums. Coming to questions related to more than two charges. Okay, hope you remember. So when you have 3 point charges, and taking all the 3 charges identical at the vertices of an equilateral triangle whose side is equal to L. Find the force acting on the vertex. Okay, how do we use the superposition principle? If I want the force acting on C, we know this charge is experiencing 2 forces due to A as well as due to B. Because of A, repulsive force on C due to A. Between these two also there is a repulsive force on C due to B. Angle between them is 60. How to get the net force? First I'll write the magnitude. Force on C due to B equals to force on C due to A, because both are identical. Can I write it as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught? I'm writing it as K Q square by L square. This I will take it as F. Apply parallelogram law of vector addition. The net force on C should be square root of F square plus F square plus 2 into F into cos 60. Okay, we know the value of cos 60 is 1 by 2. Okay, we'll get the net force as root 3 times of F. That's nothing but root 3 KQ square divided by L square. So this will give you the force acting on the charge at the vertex C, which is directed upward. Similarly, if you find the force on B, even this is experiencing 2 forces, I'll get the resultant this side. This is the force on B, same in magnitude. On A, this is the force acting on A. Now if you observe all the 3 forces and take the vector sum of all of them, okay, FA, this is FC, sorry, FA, FB and FC. If all of them are added according to Lamy's theorem, the net force will always be 0. So sum of the forces acting on the vertices of an equilateral triangle would be 0. FA plus FB plus FC. Vector sum of all these forces would always be 0. Similarly, if the question is what is the force acting on the particle at the centroid, say if I keep a test charge Q0 and ask you what is the force acting on the centroid, this charge is going to experience 2 forces, 3 forces. Due to Q0, repulsion. Due to charge at A, repulsive force. Charge at B, repulsive force. All the 3 are equal forces acting at 120, 120 and 120 degrees. Again, according to Lamy's theorem, force acting on a charge on centroid will also become equal to 0. So if it is force on the vertex, root 3 times of KQ square by L square. Sum of the 3 forces acting at the vertices is 0. Force acting on the centroid is also 0. So this is for a system containing 3 point charges. And it is not necessary that all the time you will get all the 3 charges equal in magnitude. Magnitude may differ and even the nature of charge may also be different. Okay, now for 4 point charges, if I take the forces, charges as all positive and Q at the vertices of a square. Now what is the net force experienced by the charge at a vertex? If I name this as A, B, C and D. Let's find the net force on D. See, D is going to experience 3 forces due to C. Force on D due to C. Force on D due to A. And here you have one more force. Force on D due to B. So if you take the magnitude of these 2 forces, okay, I'll say take the side of this square as L. Find out what is the magnitude of force on D and C, which is equal to D and A, KQ square by L square, I'll call this as F. Then force between these two, because the distance is increased to root 2L. Force between B and D will have a magnitude kq square by root 2L whole square, which is nothing but F by 2. Now I need the net force on this. How to write the net force? Resultant of these two plus the third, or sum of three vectors. What is the sum of these two vectors which are perpendicular to each other? Since these two forces are equal and are perpendicular to each other, the resultant will act along the diagonal. So sum of FDA and DC will be root 2F, because like forces acting at 90 degrees, use parallelogram law, will get root 2F, which is acting along the diagonal, plus there is already F by 2 acting along the diagonal, plus F by 2 will give you the magnitude of force acting on the vertex at D. And now you can simplify and write force acting on the vertex D is root 2 plus half into F, where F is kq square divided by L square. So this is how for 4 charges also you can use parallelogram of vector addition and then get the answer. So if the question is what is the force acting on the centroid, again all the forces are getting cancelled. Force between due to D is cancelled by due to B. Force due to C is cancelled by force due to A if you keep a charge at the center. So the net force acting at the center, 4 point charges of equal magnitude will always be 0. So this is an example for a system containing 4 charges. Okay, now coming to questions related to electric field lines and properties. Hope you remember the properties. No two field lines intersect. In a charge-free region, electric field lines are always continuous, and then field lines is a measure of the nature of electric field. If the field lines are closely packed, then field is stronger. If the field lines are far apart, field is weaker. So regarding field lines, okay, you will have to remember some diagrams, like for a positive charge, field lines are always directed away. For a negative charge, they are directed towards the charge. Field lines always start at positive, terminate at negative charge. Then for a dipole, what is the nature of electric field? Okay, for a dipole between positive and negative charges, field is directed from positive to a negative. So if you observe the field lines, you will know the nature of electric field. What is the nature of electric field? Okay, when you move from positive charge towards a negative charge, field is stronger, becomes weaker at the center, again it will increase towards the negative charge. Then sometimes they may give you a question like this. Okay, now coming to questions related to electric field lines. Okay, generally we get theory and conceptual questions there. Okay, we know no two field lines intersect each other. In a charge-free region, field lines are always continuous curves. They move away from positive charge and towards a negative charge. If the field lines are closely packed, then field is stronger. If they are far apart from each other, field is weaker. Then I don't think you need to understand the distribution of field lines for a positive charge, negative charge, dipole, 2 positive charges separated by a distance, 3 positive charges at the vertices of a triangle. So all this type of field line diagrams we have already studied in subjective. But let me discuss 2 questions here. Say sometimes a question is given like this. 2 charges Q1 and Q2 are separated by a certain distance, and the nature of field is as shown below. Okay, field lines are starting from Q1 and they are terminating at Q2. Okay, this is how the distribution is given. Now from this, options are given. Okay, what can we say about Q1 and Q2? So observe the field lines emerging from Q1 and Q2. Since field is moving from Q1 towards Q2, what is the first inference you get? Q1 is positive charge, Q2 is negative charge. Then count the number of field lines. See here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 3, 8 field lines. Whereas for Q2 the number density is more. So what is the second inference that you can get by observing the diagram? Magnitude of Q1 is less than the magnitude of Q2. Okay, this charge is less in magnitude, negative charge is more in magnitude. And third point, they may ask you, okay, if I consider this as a line passing through their centers, okay, I will name this point as P, Q and R. At which point there is a probability of the net field becoming 0. Again I am giving you a question, at which point P or Q or R the net field may become 0. See, definitely answer is not Q, because field line is moving from Q1 to Q2, field cannot be 0 in between them. So there is a probability of field becoming 0 at P or R, but which is the correct answer? See, I told you magnitude of Q1 is less and Q2 is more. So if the point lies outside the system, field will become 0 only at a point which is closer to the smaller magnitude of charge. Again I am repeating, if the point where electric field becomes 0 is not within the system, at which side the probability of becoming 0 is high? Towards smaller magnitude, because you are close to smaller magnitude, away from the negative charge, that means away from larger magnitude. So which is the point where electric field becomes 0? Okay, choose a point which is closer to smaller in magnitude. Since Q1 is having less magnitude, this is the point where the probability of field becoming 0 is true. So this is one question related to field lines. Let's look into one more question. One more question which is related to electric field line. It is said that there are two charges Q1 and Q2 separated by a certain distance. A field line emerging from Q1 at an angle alpha reaches Q2 at an angle beta. So find the relationship between these two angles, alpha and beta. So to get this answer, once try to recollect, okay, when we studied fluxes, if you have a point charge Q at a distance, some distance from a disk or a cap, then join this line. If I call this angle as theta, even this will also be equal to theta, passing through the center. The number of field lines passing through the disk, that is flux, is given by the formula Q by 2 epsilon naught into 1 minus cos theta. Okay, you can remember this formula. Okay, if this is a disk or a cap-like structure, okay, a part of a sphere, you have a charge Q at some distance x. Then flux passing through the disk or a cap is Q by 2 epsilon naught into 1 minus cos theta, where this angle I am taking it as equal to theta. Now I will be making use of this condition even for this particular question. See, since field lines are leaving from Q1 and reaching Q2, consider one surface, okay, a disc-like structure here. Okay, let this be the disc at some distance in between them. See, the flux entering from this side is leaving from the other side. So I will equate the two fluxes. What is the flux emerging from Q1 passing through this disc? Phi 1. Flux entering the disc is Q1 by 2 epsilon naught into 1 minus cos alpha. Then if this is a negative charge, or Q2, flux which is entering or reaching this Q2, phi 2 is equal to Q2 by 2 epsilon naught into 1 minus cos beta. Okay, because here angle is beta. Here flux is entering the surface, this is leaving the surface. Okay, we know the net flux passing through the disc should be 0. Whatever flux is entering has to leave from the other side. So if I equate these two, 2 epsilon naught will anyway get cancelled. What is Q1 by Q2? Or Q1 into 1 minus cos alpha is Q2 into 1 minus cos beta. See, did we get a relationship between Q1, Q2 alpha and beta? Implies q1 by q2 is equal to 1 minus cos beta by 1 minus cos alpha. And if you want, you can leave the answer like this, or still you can simplify. We know 1 minus cos beta by 2 is sine square beta by 2. So you can write it as sine square beta by 2, and this is sine square alpha by 2. Okay, if I further simplify it by using trigonometric functions, 1 minus cos 2 theta can be written as 2 sine square theta. So 2 sine square beta by 2 by 2 sine square alpha by 2, or square root of q1 by q2 becomes equal to sine beta by 2 by sine alpha by 2. So simplification is up to you. Okay, one more question related to field lines. There is a positive charge plus q, and then you have kept one conducting sphere at a certain distance. Okay, it's a conducting sphere. So because of this positive charge, what would happen? Due to induction, a negative charge is induced, and here we get a positive charge. So what will be the nature of field lines? Field lines emerging from q1 will enter this negative charge. Okay, they bend, become perpendicular to the surface. Okay, the field line should always be perpendicular to the surface. Then again from positive charge they come out perpendicular to the surface. Okay, so this is the nature of field when you keep a conducting sphere near a positively charged particle. Okay, so this type of questions will also be given. Always remember, field inside the conductor will always be a 0, whereas field lines will always end perpendicular to the surface. Now coming to questions related to evaluation of electric field strength. How do we define electric field strength? Capital E is defined as force experienced by a unit positive charge or a test charge. Limit as Q0 tends to 0. Okay, here one conceptual question will be asked. Why should this test charge should be of smaller magnitude? Okay, because it should not disturb the existing field. Okay, this is for testing whether the electric field is stronger or weaker, but it is not to disturb the existing electric field, because if this charge becomes very large, okay, say field is produced by a charge capital Q, and you are bringing another large magnitude of charge to test the field, it will definitely disturb the existing field. So that's why always we have to take this test charge as small in magnitude as possible. That's why it is called as a test charge. It is used for testing, not for disturbing the existing field. Then for a point charge, how do you write this relation for electric field? If you write the force as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q1 q2 by r square, we get it as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q divided by r square. So field is obeying inverse square relation. So related to electric fields, okay, let us see how the numericals will be given. Now coming to questions related to evaluation of electric field strength. Okay, so the first we'll start with 2 point charges. Okay, say sometimes you get 2 point charges, say 4q and q. They are separated by a certain distance. Find a point where electric field is 0. See, if both the charges are of same type, positive and positive, field will be 0 somewhere in between the charges. So if the distance, say it is 1 meter, select a point which is at a distance x, where the field will become a 0. So field at this point would become 0 if the field produced by 4q is cancelled by field produced by q. So I will equate the two fields at this particular point. So 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught 4q by x square kq by r square should be equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q by 1 minus x whole square, because the remaining distance will become 1 minus x. So simplify this. Apply square root on either sides. 2 by x is equal to 1 by 1 minus x implies 2 minus 2x is equal to x, or 3x is equal to 2. What is x equal to? 2 by 3 meter from 4q. This is must. From which charge are you measuring the distance has to be mentioned. So this is the case if both the charges are of same type. If one of them is negative, then definitely there is no point in between these two charges where the field is 0, because field line will exist from positive to negative. Then at which point I told you to select a point outside the system closer to a smaller magnitude of charge. See, 4q is more in magnitude when compared to q. So you have to select a point close to a smaller magnitude of charge. So this is the point where the net field may become 0. So instead of x, take this distance as x. Field due to 4q should be cancelled by field due to minus q. So if I take the fields due to these two, 4q is at a distance 1 plus x. So this will become 1 plus x whole square. And due to q, it is at a distance x square. Again simplify it. 2 by 1 plus x will be 1 by x. Okay, on solving this equation. Okay, what will be the value of x equal to? 2x is equal to 1 plus x, or x is equal to 1 meter from minus q. Because this time I took the distance from minus q, not from 4q. So this is one simple question for 2-point charges evaluating. Okay, now coming to questions related to electric flux and Gauss law. Okay, how do we define electric flux? Okay, we know flux is defined as the number of field lines passing through a given surface, which is equal to E dot A, or you can write it as integral of E dot ds. Okay, so this is your formula for electric flux. And regarding electric flux, remember area vector is always perpendicular to the surface. So one simple logical question. A square plate is placed in a uniform electric field. This is your electric field, making an angle, say given as theta. Okay, the side is A. What is the flux passing through the surface? Okay, the moment they give you this area, is this the area vector which is outside the plane of the paper or plane of the board? Electric field is on the board, area vector is outside. What is the angle between E and A? Theta is 90 degrees. So don't confuse electric field into area into cos 90. Cos 90 is 0. So what is the flux passing through the surface equal to? 0. So whenever it is parallel to the surface, the flux passing through the surface will always be 0. So this is a simple but logical question. Then look at one more question. Look at this question. There is a cube whose side is 0.1 meter, which is placed in a 3-dimensional space as shown in the figure. Okay, they are taking this as x, y and z axis. Okay, the question is find out the net flux passing through the cube with electric fields varying according to these relations. Okay, say in the first case electric field is along x axis, y axis, z axis. Electric field is in both x and y directions. In the last case, electric field is variable. It is varying with distance x. Start from the first question. If electric field is 10 I cap, so that means field is along x axis having a constant magnitude. Just observe, because field is along x axis, flux will pass through these two shaded portions. For this surface, this is the area vector, outward normal. For this surface, area vector is in the backward direction, n cap. See, I have given you electric field along x axis, which is having a magnitude of 10 units. For this surface, find out what is the flux. E into area vector into angle between them. Electric field is along x axis, area vector is in opposite direction, so angle between them is 180 degree. So electric field magnitude is 10, area is 0.1 into 0.1 meter, area of this plate into cos 180, which is minus 1. Flux through the first shaded portion. Then flux through the second surface. I'll call this as first and second surface. Same value. E into A into cos 0. because E and N are in same direction. Angle between E and area vector is 0. Cos 0 is 1. What should be the net flux passing through the cube? Is it sum of these two? What should your answer be? 0. So don't solve it. If the field is uniform, whatever field is entering the cube from this side, the flux is leaving from the other side. Field lines are entering from one side, leaving from the other. No charge is enclosed by the cube. So what should be the net flux passing through this cube? Equal to 0. Same answer you get even for this and this. If the field is along y-axis, field will enter from the bottom face, leave from the top. But still the net flux will always be 0. Even in this case, net flux becomes 0. Third case also net flux is 0. Even if the field is two-dimensional, again the net flux would become 0. But in this case, field is non-uniform. It is varying according to the equation 10x into I cap. So in such a case, let us see how to evaluate the field. So again I will find out, because field is along x-axis, flux passing through the first surface, phi 1. Electric field which is at a distance of 0.1 meter from origin, x is 0.1. So 10 into 0.1 into area of this portion, 0.1 into 0.1. Angle between electric field and area vector is 180 degrees, so minus 1. So phi 1 is equal to 0.1 into 0.1 into 0.1. I will write it 10 power minus 2 with minus sign, Newton per Coulomb into meter square. Now calculate the flux to the second surface. See, field at this point, it is at a distance 0.1 plus 0.1, that is 0.2. The value of x is not 0.1, now it has become 0.2. So flux passing through second surface, electric field, 10 into 0.2, area vector, 0.1 into 0.1 into cos 0 is 1. Find out the value. It is 2 into 10 power minus 2 Newton meter square per Coulomb. Now flux which is passing through first surface is negative, second surface is positive. What should be the net value? Net flux in the last bit will be phi 1 plus phi 2. Add the two values. 2 into 10 power minus 2 minus 10 power minus 2 is 1 into 10 power minus 2 Newton meter square per Coulomb. So only if the field is variable, there will be some net flux entering or passing through the cube. Otherwise, whatever field lines are entering will leave from the other side. Net flux will remain as 0. Okay, now coming to questions related to Gauss law and its applications. So we know for Gauss law, the net flux passing through a closed Gaussian surface, integral of E dot ds. What is it equal to? 1 by epsilon naught times the net charge enclosed by the Gaussian surface. So while studying the questions on Gaussian surface, one very important point which you have to remember is the field what you are calculating is because of all the charges present in the vicinity, whereas Q net is only the charge which is present inside the Gaussian surface. So to understand this, randomly I will take a number of charges in the free space. Assume I have constructed this as my Gaussian surface. So when you are evaluating electric field is due to all the charges Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 and Q5. Whereas the net charge whatever I am writing here is only the charge which is enclosed by the Gaussian surface, that is Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3. Remember this point, okay, when you are solving questions on Gauss law. And regarding Gauss law, we have number of conceptual questions. See, there is a charge Q at the center of a cube. What is the flux emerging from all the sides of a cube? Okay, flux should be charge enclosed by epsilon. Flux passing through one surface of a cube, because flux is emerging from 6 surfaces. For all the 6 surfaces, it is Q by epsilon naught. For one surface, 1/6 of Q by epsilon naught. If this square is replaced with a sphere, will there be any change in the flux? No. Gaussian's flux depends only on the charge enclosed, not on the size and shape of the Gaussian surface. Then if the charge is at the vertex of a cube, what is the flux passing through the cube? Okay, if you have the charge q at the vertex, then only 1/8 of the charge is inside it. Flux through the cube, all surfaces, is 1/8 times of q by epsilon naught. Flux through only one surface. Okay, we know flux through this surface and the front surface. Okay, the charge which is connecting the three surfaces, top, side and the front surface is 0. Just now I told you, if field lines are parallel to the surface, flux passing through it is 0. So this flux is distributed among the remaining three surfaces, that is bottom, this side and the back surface. So what is flux through one surface? If the charge is at the vertex of a cube, 1/3 of q by 8 epsilon naught, which is 1/24 q by epsilon naught. Or if the charge is here, okay, at the center of the side, then what is the flux through the cube? Cover it. Two cubes are sharing the charge. So for one cube, it will be q divided by 2 epsilon naught. So like this, keeping the charges at various positions, they may ask you to calculate the flux, which is a very simple question. Or 10 dipoles are placed inside a cube. What is the net flux? What is the net charge of a dipole? It is 0. Since net charge of a dipole is 0, the net flux, even if you put 10 dipoles or 20 dipoles, will always be 0. So like this type of conceptual questions you get regarding fluxes. Or I told you one more formula. Then we have applied Gauss law for continuous charge distribution, like linear charge distribution, surface charge distribution and volume charge distribution, and we have evaluated the electric field. Okay, remember the formula? What is electric field due to an infinite linear charge distribution at the point P? We know electric field is given by the relation if the linear charge density is lambda, E is equal to lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught r, where r is this perpendicular distance. So this is how you can find electric field for an infinite long linear charge distribution. Okay, then for a large infinitely charged non-conducting plate or a plain sheet of charges, all these we have studied as applications of Gauss law. For an infinite plane sheet of charges, electric field with surface charge density sigma, E is equal to sigma by 2 epsilon naught. If it is a conducting plate, it becomes sigma by epsilon naught. And then for spherical charge distribution, if it is a conducting or non-conducting shell, if charge is uniformly distributed on the surface, what is electric field inside this shell? 0. On the surface, 1/4 pi epsilon naught q by r square, where r is the radius. For a point lying at a distance r dash, electric field at this particular point is k into q divided by r dash square. But the same thing if it is a conducting sphere. It is a conducting sphere, solid. Even then we know when you charge it, charge resides only on the surface. As long as it is a conductor, what is electric field inside the sphere? 0. We call this as electrostatic shielding. Then on the surface, it's kq by r square. And when you go far away from the center, it is kq divided by r dash square. Okay, then for a disk which is having a uniform charge distributed on it, surface charge density is sigma. What is electric field at this particular point? if I take this angle as theta, it is sigma by 2 epsilon naught into 1 minus cos theta. Okay, then for a ring, what is the electric field along axial line of a ring? E is equal to kq into x by x square plus r square whole to the power 3 by 2. Okay, where k is nothing but 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. And if you observe the variation of electric field for a ring, when x is 0, field at the center is 0. As you move away, field increases till you reach a distance r by root 2, and after that field will start decreasing. Same thing happens on the opposite side. Till r by root 2, value will increase and then it will decrease because field at the center is 0. This is for a ring. Okay, then for a semicircle. Okay, if you have a semicircle or an arc of circle with linear charge density lambda, subtending an angle theta here, what is electric field given by E is equal to lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught r into sin theta by 2. Okay, then coming to field produced by a non-conducting sphere, okay, with volume charge distributed on it. Okay, if the volume charge density of the sphere is rho, then field at center will be 0. Okay, if you are inside the sphere at a distance small r, okay, what is electric field at a distance small r from center? Rho r by 3 epsilon naught. Remember, rho is the volume charge density. On the surface, rho into capital R by 3 epsilon naught. And when you are completely outside, say at a distance r dash from center, and if this total charge is capital Q, you can write it as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q divided by r dash square, where Q represents the total charge. If you want, you can express it even in terms of rho. You can replace Q as rho into 4 by 3 pi r cube, otherwise in terms of Q and r dash. So for a non-conducting sphere with volume charge distributed uniformly, then these are the values of electric field which we have evaluated by using Gauss law. So Gauss law helps you in finding the electric field even for continuous charge distributions. So these are some of the applications or some of the points that you have to remember regarding electric field due to continuous charge distribution. Okay, now coming to a dipole. Regarding a dipole, we have studied field along axial line, then along equatorial line, and for any other point on a dipole. Okay, let us see the formulas. We know dipole is a system of equal and opposite charges separated by a finite distance. Dipole moment is the product of charge into distance between the charges. Direction is always from negative to positive. So how do we evaluate the field along axial and equatorial lines of a point dipole at a distance small r? This point, which is passing through the axis, is called axial line. Then this line is called the axial line. So what is the field along axial line? E axial, which is in the direction of dipole moment, is k is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught 2p by r cube. Whereas for equatorial line, at a distance smaller from the center, okay, provided r is much larger when compared to the size of the dipole, field along equatorial line is k 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught p by r cube with a minus sign. That is, if dipole moment is from negative to positive, field is in the opposite direction. But if a point is P at any other point making an angle theta with the dipole moment, then how do we evaluate the electric field? Okay, we take two components, angular and radial components. Okay, for a point P which is making an angle theta with with the dipole moment, this is radial component, and this component we call it as angular component. The resultant of these two will give you the net electric field. So how to get this radial and angular components? If this is your dipole moment P, I will split this dipole moment into two components. Okay, if this is a dipole moment along this line, P cos theta, and this side we have P sin theta. For P cos theta component, ER is the axial line. So what is ER equal to? 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, 2 times of, instead of dipole moment, I will take the component 2P cos theta divided by R cube. Then similarly, angular component, this value. If P sin theta is the dipole moment, we know electric field is opposite to that, and it is equatorial line for this dipole. So field along equatorial line is K into P sin theta divided by R cube. And once you know these two, what is this angle alpha? If I take this angle as alpha, or whatever you want, okay, if I have taken this as alpha, what is tan alpha equal to? E theta by ER. So tan alpha is equal to E theta by ER. Divide these two, tan alpha becomes K and K, R cube and R cube gets cancelled. Sin by cos, that is tan theta divided by 2. And the net field you can find out by using the relation ER square plus E theta square. So if the point is neither axial nor equatorial, you can make use of these relations. Then for a dipole, we have already studied that if you place a dipole in a uniform field, the net force acting on the dipole will always be 0. But it experiences a net torque. What is the torque acting on a dipole? P cross E. P into E into sin theta, where theta is the angle between dipole moment and your applied electric field. Then when is this torque maximum and minimum? It depends on the value of theta. Maximum for 90 degrees, minimum for 0. And if theta is 0 and you are placing a dipole in a uniform field, it is said to be in stable equilibrium. Okay, if your dipole aligns in the direction of electric field, what is this condition called as? Stable equilibrium. In stable equilibrium, net torque will be 0. Net force is anyway 0. Theta is 0 degrees. Potential energy. Okay, we know potential energy of a dipole is minus P dot E, where P is the dipole moment and E is the electric field. Potential energy will be minimum, which is minus P into E. Whereas if you reverse it for theta equal to 180 degree, okay, it is said to be in which position? Unstable equilibrium. This is an example for unstable equilibrium. Force is 0, net torque is 0, theta is 180, but potential energy will be maximum, which is plus PE. Minus PE is the minimum potential energy. If potential energy is minimum, it is said to be stable. If potential energy is maximum, it is in unstable equilibrium. And any other position, hope you remember, it is called as an unstable position. So these points, if you remember regarding electric dipole, then you will be in a position to answer the simple and formula based questions.